Now, Jens Stoltenberg says that NATO has failed to deliver weapons to Ukraine in good time. He made the remarks during an unannounced visit to Kyiv on Monday. NATO's Secretary-General says Russia has exploited Ukraine's battlefield disadvantage, but insisted it's not too late for Kyiv to win the war, which is now in its third year. Volodymyr Zelenskyy, for his part, urged Washington to speed up its deliveries, its weapons deliveries. Here's some of what they had to say at a joint press conference after their meeting.
NATO allies have not delivered what they promised. The United States spent months not agreeing a package for Ukraine, and European allies have not delivered the amount of ammunition they promised. And this has had serious consequences on the battlefield. The lack of ammunition has enabled the Russians to push forward along the front line. Lack of air defense has made it possible for more Russian missiles to hit their targets. And the lack of deep strike capabilities has made it possible for the Russians to concentrate more forces. And we see the consequences of that now.
On the question of timely support of our army, today I do not see anything positive. There are supplies, they arrive little by little, but we need to speed up this process. Regarding the question about money, it is very important and we're very grateful to our partners. But what we will get with this money is also very important.
OK, let's get more from Nick Connolly, our correspondent in Kyiv. Hi, Nick. So we heard Jens Stoltenberg saying that NATO allies have not delivered what they promised. That's quite an acknowledgement of failure from the NATO chief there, isn't it?
It was, and you had those fairly terse words from Volodymyr Zelenskyy saying that he hadn't basically seen much reason for hope in the last few days since that aid package was signed off, and first deliveries, we believe, are on their way. I think he's clear that he needs to keep the pressure up. I think basically the dynamic in all of this war, something that Ukrainian analysts have said to me, is that as long as Ukraine at least holds stability on the front lines and shoots down most of the missiles coming at cities like Kyiv, where I am now, or even Kharkiv, closer to the Russian border, basically that takes away the pressure on Western allies to speed up, to get around their own bureaucracy and to send Ukraine what it needs. And basically then, after a while, those supplies run down. Once again, the Russian attacks become more successful again, and then you get the voices of those saying that this is an unwinnable war, that Ukraine needs to come to some kind of deal with the Russians, and basically that sending any more weapons towards Ukraine is not worth it, is just going to prolong something that is unwinnable. And then eventually Western countries come around, think about the price of seeing Ukraine lose to Russia, and then eventually get round to setting up new orders and new supplies, which obviously have a long lag time, and we don't quite know how much Ukraine is going to be getting in the foreseeable future.
Right. I mean, we know more weapons are on the way, but from the Ukrainian perspective, will all of this be enough?
I think if you speak to most of the experts and lots of the analysts following this, they say this is enough to stabilize the situation till the end of the year. This is enough to prevent Russia kind of rolling over all of eastern Ukraine. It is enough to do that, but not enough for Ukraine to try again to retake Russian-held territory. It buys time, but it doesn't solve the problem. They say the West really needs to get a strategy to think what it wants to achieve. Does it want to see Vladimir Putin's Russia fail here? Does it want to see Ukraine win rather than just survive? And then it needs to basically put Western economies on a war footing in a way that the Russian economy has long been. And rather than just having sporadic deliveries, sporadic orders, have a kind of basically a roadmap for the next couple of years, and just supplies on a whole different scale to what Ukraine has seen so far, where currently the money is big in terms of the absolute numbers, but in terms of Western military budgets, what Ukraine is getting isn't terribly big. And in the case of the US, it's significantly less than 10% of the US's annual military budget that's being sent this way.
Mm-hmm. We've heard Ukraine's top general saying his forces have suffered several setbacks. I know that you were on the front lines recently. Tell us what you saw there.
So we are just back from eastern Ukraine, from Donbass. We were filming there for a week, and there is a worry that the Russians are now going to try and push home their advantage while those new American deliveries are still on their way and still aren't making themselves felt. There is a real sense, and there's been a lot of speculation, that Vladimir Putin has ordered his generals to seize the city of Chasiv Yar before the 9th of May, that Victory Day holiday in Russia. And certainly there is a huge amount of Russian pressure on Ukrainian positions. We've seen the Ukrainians moving back village by village, nothing kind of chaotic or a rout yet, but certainly a real activation of those Russian forces. Lots of drones in the air and huge Russian losses, but nonetheless the Russians pushing on. And there's a real worry that if the Russians do get Chasiv Yar, holding on to the rest of Donetsk region, the western part of Donetsk region that Kyiv still controls, cities like Kramatorsk, Konstantinivka, that will be increasingly difficult. And then supplying the front lines, if those cities, those railway hubs are taken by the Russians, would become a whole lot more difficult. So there is a real worry there that we could see a real push by the Russians in the east, and that those western supplies just aren't going to get there in time. For now, it's not looking like a kind of critical situation where the front is going to collapse, but that is certainly something they are all thinking about and worrying about right now.
Nick, thanks so much for that. That's DW's Nick Connolly reporting from Kyiv. Our next report follows the recovery of a Ukrainian soldier who was wounded and captured by pro-Russian forces, then traded to freedom via a prisoner exchange. His journey started by crawling to safety. He took beatings and survived torture before infection took his hands and feet. He is free now, but he's learning how to walk into a very different life.
Every step is a fight for Vyacheslav, but he's proud he can stand up by himself. A small triumph that seemed a far-off dream until recently.
I can walk without my hands, but my knee won't work.
He lost both his hands and legs after being severely wounded on the battlefield and neglected in Russian captivity. Before the war, Vyacheslav worked as a mechanic and a driver. He volunteered for the army in March 2022. He fought for almost a year in Kherson and near Avdiivka until he almost lost his life in January of last year in a Russian assault.
I tried to retreat. I thought I'd make it. There were shots. I was hit. I screamed and passed out. They thought they'd finished me off. When I came to, I no longer had my gun. I got shot through here, and one leg was shot. I got hit here too, where the laces are, along the hem like this, until it shattered a bone. Here, I lost the muscles.
For 7 days, Vyacheslav crawled on what was left of his legs, trying to get out of the conflict zone, but was then captured by militants from the Russia-backed Donetsk People's Republic. Vyacheslav says he was mentally and physically abused while in captivity.
At first, they put a poker into an oven to heat it up. They wanted to torture me. They dragged me on this chair to a door, and there they beat me. I got bruises everywhere, and my nose swelled up. I couldn't stand it and just gave in. After that, he said, he's done. Put him in the grave.
Vyacheslav spent 3 months in captivity in Chechnya. His frostbitten hands and injured legs had to be amputated after gangrene set in. He was exchanged on June 11, 2023. Currently, Vyacheslav is undergoing rehabilitation. He's been fitted for prostheses, he can walk on a treadmill, does puzzles, and is relearning to swim.
I'm afraid of every step when I walk, because crutches are not reliable. But with the walker, it's better. Today I had trouble, but I managed to hold on. It's always a bit scary on crutches.
Earlier, Vyacheslav dreamed of opening his own garage and repairing motorcycles. Now, he says, he's thinking of what his next steps can be.